So we're just going to start our discussions and predictions section talking about the FIBA World Cup. Today's Saturday, the 9th. Yesterday, some big storylines happened. The USA lost to Germany in a highly contested game, and Canada lost to Serbia. Both massive upsets in the grand scheme of the tournament, as the US and the Canadians were obviously the two big favorites to face off in the finals. Now facing off in the third place game, which is going to be a great game, but having Germany versus Serbia in the final, which is really just surprising, especially without Jokic playing for Serbia. Germany isn't super star-studded outside of the Wagner brothers and Dennis Schroeder. You guys have any thoughts, especially on the Noah Lyles comments that ultimately kind of foreshadowed this whole thing?
Yeah, I'll just hop in really quickly. First off, wanted to introduce our new guest on the show, Aiden McKernan, GWSBA's VP of Member Engagement. Aiden, if you want to say hi to everyone.
Hey guys, how are you?
Welcome to Second Take. So yeah, Eddie, to respond to your point, I think in the light of the Noah Lyles comments, this was something that I think the U.S. players had in the back of their mind, that they're being challenged by their own countrymen, and saying that just because you win the NBA championship doesn't mean you're world champions. And now they're playing in the FIBA World Cup while these comments were made. And I think the biggest problem with USA basketball in the recent years is the fact that we don't take our best players to this. We don't take our best players to the Olympics. We haven't in the last couple Olympics, and we haven't taken our best players to the FIBA World Cup. And so I think it's really important to understand that in order for us to be world champions, you got to bring the best of the best. Eddie, what do you think about that?
No, I mean, I agree. And also, I really think the Noah Lyles comments don't really apply to this. He said this more in the context of kind of the NBA, and after the NBA champions claimed themselves world champions, he was like, no, this is really just North America. This is really just the US. You're not really playing against teams from around the world. Everybody's kind of taking it in the context of oh, the USA lost on the world stage. I mean, it applies, but it doesn't really. But honestly, the USA losing, even though it's our B team, or some might even say our C team, I really think that, I mean, obviously it sucks as an American, but for the sport of basketball overall, it's a great thing to be able to have a lot of these countries that basketball wasn't historically as present there, where it's getting a lot bigger. I mean, I think it's the same as when the U.S. lost in the World Baseball Classic last year, too. I can't remember if it was Mexico or Japan. I know Japan ended up winning the final. But these sports that were traditionally American, that were literally invented in America and that have slowly spread around the world, I really think the best way that you're just going to get the rest of the world involved and the rest of the world actually interested in these historically American sports is them succeeding on the international stage. And although some might say oh, the U.S. doesn't have LeBron James, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, our best players there. I mean, these are still NBA All-Stars that we have out there that are losing to some of the best talent from around the world. It really just shows how far the sport of basketball has come, how far the sport of baseball has come too with the World Baseball Classic, because we had our best players there last year. And I believe in the Olympics next year, we're going to have some more premier talent. I saw earlier LeBron hinted on, I think it was Instagram. He reposted something about him showing up to the 2024 Olympics. So we probably should have some of our stars back there. And it'll definitely make it an interesting thing, especially if guys like Jokic and Giannis are playing for their respective countries. Same with Luka. But yeah, I think it's just awesome to see how the sport of basketball has been able to grow to an international audience, and how much it actually means to some of these countries, especially being able to beat the U.S. on an international stage like that.
Yeah, just to harp off that point, I think it's actually interesting as well to see a team like Germany succeeding. It's kind of almost you're seeing the real-time effects of Dirk Nowitzki coming into the NBA, dominating, because basketball basically wasn't a sport there. It was not a big sport at all, and now all those German kids grew up seeing Dirk dominating the NBA, and you could see the development of their program. I mean, the level of players they have now, they have multiple NBA players there. A lot of good EuroLeague players. It's really interesting to see.
Yeah, it's also cool to note that FIBA, the FIBA rules really play a lot different than the NBA. Everybody thought the US and Canada were going to go in and dominate since they had the most NBA All-Stars, most NBA caliber players. FIBA rules really play different relative to the NBA rules. And Germany, I think they have the Wagner brothers. They have Dennis Schroeder. They have Daniel Tice, which are really their only NBA caliber players. But they just outplayed the U.S. because they knew the FIBA rules better and they knew how to play better as a unit. Same with Serbia, who didn't even have the best player in the world in Jokic. It really just shows how the international game is a lot different, how the EuroLeague game especially is a lot different than the NBA. And it's a really interesting kind of storyline to see that as the rest of the world catches up in talent, like how is our international game as a country going to evolve to be able to kind of keep up with this different style of playing present in EuroLeague and present on the international stage?
Yeah. And I think one more point to note just about FIBA in general. We have to give a little shout out to Yuta Watanabe on the Japanese team. I mean, he's a GW alumni, and he has been playing some incredible basketball, including his time at the Brooklyn Nets. I think at one point in the last NBA season, he was shooting upwards of 45% from the three-point line, leading the league. So that's just an interesting point to point out, and that Japan as a unit is growing too. I'm not sure if Rui Hachimura played in this year's FIBA World Cup. I don't think he did.
I don't think he did.
Yeah, but the Japanese talent is there, and the sport is growing globally.
Yeah. Speaking of the NBA though, like Utah's on the Suns this year. What do you guys think of the Suns overall? Like, do you guys think that they're legit? Like, do you think the star power is going to actually carry them, or do you think it's going to kind of be another super team that falls apart and fails to meet expectations?
I feel like it's hard to say. Bradley Beal going there is definitely interesting. He's a very different player to Chris Paul. We might see a little bit of friction, I feel like, between Beal and Booker. They play more similar play styles than Chris Paul and Devin Booker did. But I think also the amount of talent they have, Devin Booker he's good every year. Kevin Durant is unbelievable. Bradley Beal finally has a chance to be on a great team. He might take that chance. We'll see. We haven't really seen that before. I think they have a good chance of doing well. I mean, obviously the Nuggets are still a really, really good team. They didn't really lose that many pieces. Jamal Murray is unbelievable point guard. Obviously, Nikola Jokic is unbelievable center. So I think it's going to be a really tough one seed to get, but I think the Phoenix Suns will definitely be in contention.
Yeah, it might be a case of like too many cooks in the kitchen with the amount of like just offensive talent they have, the amount of raw offensive talent they have. We'll have to see if they'll come together as a unit, since like obviously Chris Paul he is the point guard. He's one of the best all-time assisters, one of the best all-time passers. Losing a guy like him, like Bradley Beal, great off-ball player when he needs to be, but he hasn't really been that kind of player in a long time since John Wall was on the Wizards. So it's going to be interesting to see him as a third, even fourth option on a team like that, and kind of how that's going to factor in. Obviously, as you mentioned. Oh, sorry. What'd you say, Shemaine?
I just want to hop in here for a second and say, as a Wizards fan, this Suns team is not getting the top 4 seeds in the West. I'm going to come out and say it. They're not making the top 4 seeds in the West. Three ball dominant players on a team like that, in an environment like that. Phoenix is a hot spot for nightlife and fun and sports, and 3 ball dominant guards in that environment is not going to go well. And with the depleted bench that they have, I mean, I would love to come back on this show and be right in a couple months.
I mean, I think you are, honestly. Like, the NBA past couple of years at least, like, has really been defensive dominated. We had like that era with the Warriors where everyone was focusing on 3-point shooting and everyone was focusing on just high-powered offenses. Past couple of years especially, I think it's really been defense winning championships. Like, as you've seen with the Bucks, the Nuggets, the Lakers, these have all been like defensively anchored teams with just guys who can lock guys down defensively. And the Suns just don't really have that guy. They have role players that can do it, but none of their stars are really elite defensive players. And I think they were hoping that DeAndre Ayton was going to take that next step and be able to be an elite rim protector. But he just hasn't been able to do that so far. And he's very disgruntled, doesn't want to be there. I wouldn't be surprised if they trade him mid-season if they're not doing too hot. I really think it's going to be, for lack of a better term, a dumpster fire. But we'll see. They definitely have the talent, but
I will see. I'm interested to see how Bradley Beal fits in. I feel like depending on that role, the role he's willing to accept, it could be interesting. I'm looking at some of their other pickups. They picked up Eric Gordon. interesting 3-point shooter. Bol, another player that people don't really know what's going on with him. He hasn't really found his footing in the NBA. Obviously, a lot of talent, but seems like he's not too focused on basketball. It'll be an interesting environment for him to be in for sure. Josh Okogie returns 2-year deal. I think that's a good pickup. Very good defensive shooting guard. So I think it's interesting. I think
Yeah, I mean,
it's hard to say they won't be a top 4 team when they have Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, and Kevin Durant. I don't think.
I think the West is just that good though. Like it's gonna be tough for them to be top 4, especially with all their star players having injury history and stuff like that. But speaking of top 4, what do you guys think of the Lakers? They've been making tons of offseason signings. They just signed Christian Wood to a 2-year deal a couple days ago, which is kind of a minor headline, honestly, with everything else going on. But that's probably going to factor in a lot to their bench rotation next year. So how do you guys, or even as a starter maybe, and how do you guys think they're going to kind of factor into the playoff picture out West?
You can go, Shane.
Yeah, I just want to go ahead and say that, on paper, that Lakers team is an interesting look, right? You have Dennis Schroeder, LeBron James, not Dennis Schroeder anymore, sorry, D'Angelo Russell, LeBron James. You've got Austin Reeves, and you've got Anthony Davis, and now you got Christian Wood. And I saw something on Instagram a couple of days ago. It was actually a top comment. Christian Wood cannot guard a parked car. And I think that is going to be very interesting to see on this Lakers squad. Anthony Davis, as we all know, is very injury prone. And yes, he might be a very, very powerful offensive force. But I think defensively, when it comes to this Lakers team, sure, they'll make the playoffs. They have LeBron James on their team, arguably one of the greatest basketball players of all time. But it's just putting it together. And I think this Lakers team, although they might have the pieces to make a deep run, I just don't see it happening because of what we've mentioned in the West, that they have all this superpower.
Yeah, I mean, like, I can see what you're saying. I'm not a Lakers fan by any means. I really will never really root for the Lakers. I love LeBron, though, but I think they're going to be legit good. Like, I mean, obviously how they ended the season last year is great, and they kept all that core talent out of that. Like, they defensively were just on another level with Anthony Davis, Jared Vanderbilt, Rui Hachimura stepped up too, especially in the playoffs. And they retained all those players. Christian Wood, obviously not a great defender, but you pair him up alongside an elite rim protector like Anthony Davis, and I really think you can get all of his offensive utility out of him without having to sacrifice on the defensive end of the floor a lot. I really think they're going to be. I wouldn't call them the number 1 team out West or the number 1 team in the league like a lot of people are predicting, but they're going to be legit. Like Austin Reeves is legit. I know he's been very polarizing. A lot of people are starting to say he's overrated with all the hype he's been getting. Like he's a very, very good player, and he's just dramatically improved over the past year or two. I think he's going to take the next step this year. And yeah, I mean, I think they're definitely going to be one of the teams to beat out West, but still think the Nuggets are going to be probably the best team in the league, best team out West.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely. I think the Lakers are interesting. It seems like they have a pretty deep bench. I see also they added Gabe Vincent. Obviously, was really, really good in the playoffs for the Heat last year. Facilitating the ball and defensively, he gave my Knicks a really hard time in the playoffs. So, I think they have a really interesting team. I mean, it seems like they have a really deep bench. They also have Jackson Hayes now, really good shot protector off the bench. So, I mean, Anthony Davis is coming off the floor, and you can bring on Jackson Hayes. That's a pretty good fill up. He can also be electric offensively. He's a very physical guy. I think they'll be a good team. I think they'll easily make the playoffs this year. As long as LeBron can stay healthy, Anthony Davis. We'll see if he can ever stay healthy. We'll see how D'Angelo Russell bounces back this year. He had a mediocre year, bad playoffs last year. I think he's a pretty good player. I think he'll fit in better this year. I think now that he's had a year back there. Austin Reeves, obviously, coming off of a really good season. He did really well in the FIBA tournament as well. He'll probably be feeling confident. He got a new deal. So I think they're definitely I agree with Eddie. I think they're one of the teams to beat in the West.
Yeah, I mean, even if they're not the team to beat, I really think they are a nightmare matchup for the Suns, just with how the Suns are playing with so much offensive superpower. I think the Lakers definitely have the weapons to lock guys on the Suns down, like Jared Vanderbilt, I really think can guard Kevin Durant one-on-one, at least kind of limit him. Like I really think the Lakers are just the team the Suns do not want to run into out west. I feel like they don't match up super well against the Nuggets. Probably match up decently well against the Warriors, but I don't really know how good the Warriors are going to be this year. I'm not a huge fan of that Chris Paul trade for them. As a Wizards fan, I love the Chris Paul trade, though. We got Jordan Poole for a guy we're going to cut. But I think the Lakers are probably around the 2 or the 3 seed range, and we'll probably lose the Nuggets again, maybe in the Western Conference Finals.
On the note of seeding, just before we jump into the MLB here really quickly, I want to rapid fire. Eddie, who's your NBA champion?
I mean, I'm a Milwaukee Bucks fan. I'd love to say Milwaukee Bucks, but I don't know. I got to go with Boston Celtics as much as I hate to say it.
Aiden?
I'm gonna go with the Nuggets two-peating.
Mark?
I'll say Nuggets as well.
Nuggets as well. I'm gonna go out on a limb and I'm gonna say Wizards. No, I'm kidding. Warriors. Warriors are going to win another title this year.
Interesting.
I think they're going to find their way through the West this year. But yeah, that's our predictions on Second Take for the NBA, the FIBA, and this upcoming year. But next, we want to bring in Mark Rappaport to talk about an MLB segment. I'm going to bring him in here right now. He's just getting on. Oh, there he is. Mark, can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Awesome. Yeah, we can hear you. Mark, do you want to introduce yourself really quickly to the Second Take faithful?
Sure. I am Mark Rappaport. I am a sophomore at GW studying poli-sci and stats, and I am the social media officer for the SBA. Big sports fan, in particular baseball #1 and basketball #2, Mets, Knicks, Giants, Rangers, all that stuff. And yeah, I'm excited to talk baseball with y'all.
Awesome. Yeah. For our viewers, Mark is our baseball guy. He actually works for GW Baseball as well. He can talk a little bit about that and the opportunity that he has there. But Mark, just my first question to you about the MLB this year. What has happened to the Yankees? I mean, with such a star-studded squad and such high expectations, what went wrong?
Yeah, that seems to be everyone's question right now. It's really the Yankees, the Mets, and the Padres that have really disappointed people. The Yankees there's so many things to talk about. That the offense is just really weak, and people really overrated it. Aaron Judge is one of the best players in baseball, one of the best players of the generation, if not the best player of the generation. But that's it. I mean, who's built around him? You have a lot of players that are built on power, injury prone, old. And then you have some young players like Anthony Volpe, and some players and prospects. And it was just a risk that they took, and it failed. They also built on pitching. The pitching looked great. Garrett Cole, Carlos Rodon, and some other, and Cortez and Severino, as well as Montas. It just didn't work. They had injuries, and they bet on players who, unfortunately, were just too much of a risk. So, although it seemed great coming into it, it just did not turn out that way, and that's sometimes how it goes.
Yeah.
Honestly, Volpe, I'm surprised. Like I thought coming in, he was going to be a stud. He's struggled a little bit. He's kind of gotten a little bit better recently, but I mean, I guess it's a lot of pressure playing for the Bronx Bombers as a rookie. But he was really touted as kind of being like that generational prospect, along with like Ellie De La Cruz and some of these other guys that we've seen come onto the scene this year. Also kind of crazy to see guys like Josh Donaldson. Josh Donaldson got DFA'd a couple months ago or last month, right? It's crazy. Like, just never would have thought to see that kind of stuff. And Giancarlo Stanton has really not been playing up to his standard either. Like, there's obviously been like all those like, I don't want to say allegations, but like rumors of him like just not having effort or not being able to run fast anymore and getting thrown out at second base on what should be a triple. Like, they're just kind of a mess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, on the note of injuries, because you said that injuries have plagued the Yankees, probably the biggest injury news in the last week or two, Shohei Ohtani. He got injured, and everyone is talking about, the implications of his contract for the future. But I sort of want to know what does this do for just the Angels in general? I know the Angels have struggled generationally, but, how do you see this injury hurting the Angels down the stretch? Obviously, I think their playoff hopes are dashed, but what does this injury do for the scope of the MLB in the future?
So the Angels are dead. They unfortunately they bet they could have traded Shohei, even though it was difficult because they would have wanted so much for him. They didn't, and it turned out it was such a failure. They Shohei's still been great, but he's no longer pitching, obviously, because of the UCL, I believe, what I believe is a UCL injury. That was just a terrible error on their part. And then they realized they were out of it, so then they put like 5 of their players on waivers, including some players that they got in big trades like Lucas Giolito, Ronaldo Lopez, and even some great players like Hunter Renfroe. So they really failed there. The Angels are not looking good. It seems very unlikely. It's not impossible, but unlikely that Shohei will resign with the Angels. Who knows? In terms of free agency, this definitely does change a lot. Shohei will still get a crazy payday. I expect him to still to get more than $500 million, probably much more than that, honestly. I think the Dodgers, the Mets, the Yankees, many Padres, many other teams, and the Giants will all be interested, as well as the Mariners. I think he will still get a lot of traction, but him not pitching really does throw a wrench into it. And he might pitch again, probably definitely not next year, but it will definitely change free agency. And he'll still get a crazy contract, but it's hard to know. So it's questions right now.
Speaking of Ohtani and the impending offseason, like obviously like there's a lot of talk of him going to these like big market teams that have tons of cash to throw at him. But I know it's a lot different in the MLB where cash kind of rules all. But Mark, what do you think about kind of Ohtani just not really caring about playing for a big market team, given that he's not from the United States? He doesn't really care about playing for a team like the Dodgers, or maybe it's a learn to appeal to play for the Yankees because they're such an international brand. But like, given that he didn't grow up in a big market in the United States, it doesn't really matter to him to play for like the Giants or the Dodgers or the Red Sox or something. Would you kind of be surprised to see a smaller market team with a lot of cash kind of take a swing on him? Like maybe, I don't know, much flexibility the Texas Rangers have, or a team like that, like a team that's not historically like an MLB powerhouse or known for signing massive MLB agents. What do you think of that?
You know, I'm not totally sure. I don't totally believe him when he says that. I feel like he is claiming that he doesn't necessarily need to go to a big market, but like if we're being honest, money rules all. It's always about the money. Follow the money. It seems in this case like he will go to wherever gives him the most money, and I think he'd rather be on the West Coast. Seattle makes a lot of sense. I think it's hard to count that out. They almost got him in 2018. They have some flexibility. They have a really good team. They're fighting for the AL West against Houston and Texas, which I assume maybe we'll talk about later. But I would say I don't know. I think I will still think he'll go to the Dodgers. I think that money rules all. They have a lot of it. They're on the West Coast. Yeah, I know you don't like it. I don't like it either. But I still feel like he'll go to the Dodgers. Money rules all. They have the most of it, and they'll probably. And it seems like they've been waiting for this moment. He could go somewhere on the East Coast, like the Mets, the Yankees, maybe Philly, who knows with them, but I would still assume he goes to LA Dodgers, but we'll see.
Yeah, it would be awesome if he ended up on a team like the Mariners or the Giants. Like that would just be so much fun. And like I've heard some rumors, I know this is all just speculative, but like people talking about like the Padres moving guys like Soto, moving guys like Machado to make just general cap space and then trying to just sign Ohtani, which I don't believe in. I think the Padres are kind of stuck with this mess of a core that they created. But interesting offseason impending for sure. And that's not even talking about the MLB playoffs that are coming up. What are your thoughts on that? Like, obviously we have such an interesting array of teams right now. Some crazy races, especially out in the AL West. We have teams that haven't been good in a while, leading their divisions, like the Orioles. Like it's just a lot of storylines going into the playoffs, and I think we're gonna have a great postseason. What do you think?
There are still a bunch of questions that people are trying to answer. I think in terms of the AL West, it's Houston. It's really, Houston, Seattle, and Texas. The Rangers have kind of fallen off. Houston just had a big series against. They had a huge series against Texas, and they swept them in Arlington, and they swept and didn't just sweep them. It was a landslide. So I think Houston and Seattle are the two to look out for. I will still expect Houston to win that division. I think it's Houston's division to lose, and they have everything. Seattle could still win it. There's no question, but I think Houston will. In the AL East, Baltimore against Tampa. It's pretty close to us. Baltimore is not that far away. Baltimore should be able to hold on, but we'll see about that. And in terms of like overall predictions, I am going to go on a limb here and say I think that the Rays are really a team to look out for. They are always underrated, and they have been underrated the whole year. They've had a really good season. They're only in second place because the Orioles are doing so well. I think the Rays will end up winning the AL, and then I think the Braves, of course, I hate to say it, as a Mets fan and as a New York fan, the Braves will probably win the National League along with the Dodgers, but I think the Braves will win. And Braves against Tampa, good matchup. I think Atlanta has it. They're so good.
I'm surprised you're going with Tampa, honestly. Like after all they lost this year, I mean, obviously, like don't even want to talk about the Wander Franco stuff, but like they've just lost so much other talent in terms of injuries and other circumstances going on. I mean, it's crazy to think of how deep of a team they actually are, given how small of a market they are, given how low their payroll is. It's really a testament to their player development overall. I love Tampa. I love rooting for the small market teams in baseball. I don't think they're going to really succeed in the postseason. I think, obviously, like you mentioned, the Braves, I really think they're the team to beat. I think Houston is the team to beat as well. Like, I would love to see Seattle win the AL West, but experience in baseball just rules all, especially in the postseason. And Houston has just unlimited experience. I think that they are going to pretty handily win most of their series in the AL and coming out of the AL. And I honestly see the Braves winning it this year. I think it's their season to lose. They just dominated the Dodgers in their series. I believe it was in Atlanta. Might have been in LA. I can't remember for sure there. But the Braves just look so good. And unlike last season where they kind of went up and down and it was close with the Nets, or with the Mets rather, in that NL East race, like the Braves have just been dominant. Like they've been the team to beat all season, and they've had really no shortcomings. I think they're just going to steamroll through the playoffs and win the title.
Yeah, that's fair. I also just want to add briefly. I think that don't forget about the Toronto Blue Jays. They have been creeping on a spot for the AL wild card, and it turns out they actually have overtaken the Rangers. They have a really strong team over there. Vlad Guerrero, Bichette. They have some really good pitching, even though Alek Manoah has been kind of awful this year, but they're still very deep. I think Toronto has a good chance as well. Last year I said they'd win, and I was clearly wrong. But again, I think that Toronto could do something, and I think the Phillies, of course, too. I hate to say that, but they made it last year. They could do it again. They beat Atlanta, and they were not favored to win. They did it, so you never know. It's always that's why baseball and all sports are fun, because you never know what's going to happen. So yeah.
Yeah, nothing really beats the MLB playoffs. Like you said, I think Philly is really a nightmare matchup for anybody in the NL playoffs. Nobody wants to play Philly, especially having to go to Philly in the postseason. It's just such a difficult environment to play in. Some other teams I think are sleepers, like Chicago Cubs. That's a tough team. They not the deepest team overall, but they've been playing very well. They have a lot of momentum, especially in the second half of the season. I think that they're going to be a tough matchup for anybody in the playoffs, but I don't particularly see them going too far, but who knows? That's the magic of the MLB, right?
Absolutely.
Mark, I got a question for you. I wanted to know, just sort of just for our audience who might not be super familiar with the MLB, this season is exciting in particular because of a pitch clock change, which has sped up the game a lot. And myself, I attended a Washington Nationals game this year, and I found it to be very, very exciting, much more exciting than it had been in the past because of the 3.5-hour games as opposed to now the 2.5-hour games. So how do you think that has impacted, I guess, viewership on the MLB? And do you think the viewership in the MLB playoffs is going to be, at an all-time high?
Yeah, so I think I think it's really interesting. So I think a lot of fans are really upset about the pitch clock. Some of my friends definitely don't love it. I think it's terrific. I think it's baseball is so slow, and much as I love the sport, sitting for 3.5 or even 4 hours is really all and just too long. I mean, no one has that much time, and I think it's great. I think that viewership in the playoffs will probably be higher than it has been in the past, though the pitch clock I believe will not. I don't think there'll be a pitch clock in the playoffs. I don't think there will be one. So I don't think that will impact anything. But it's definitely been a big thing this year. And I will say also, I think a lot of players have struggled due to it. Like Max Scherzer, again, Mets now in the Rangers. He's not done too well. I think that the pitch clock has been really frustrating. So I think it's been a revolution this year in baseball. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out the rest of the year in playoffs and then next year as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, and one quick thing before we move on to our Premier League segment. Mark, obviously, like we have so many star-studded rookies and so many star-studded products with Ellie De La Cruz. I forgot the guy for the Orioles who was on LSU. Is it Dylan
Adley
Cruz?
Rutschman?
That might be, but that guy's a stud. We have so much talent, more than like ever before, kind of just coming up into the MLB. Like, what are your thoughts on kind of just the guys for the future, teams in the future, guys to look out for, not only this season, but next couple seasons down the line?
Sure. I think, Gunnar Henderson on the Orioles, and I don't believe that he went to LSU. I'm not sure who went there, but Gunnar Henderson is just a stud. I mean, the Orioles have so much talent over there. The pitching's a little bit lackluster, but Gunnar and Adley, of course, is great. They have Jackson Holiday coming up next year, who really looks like a real deal. Crazy that they have so much talent in the infield and the outfield as well. I think if you're looking at, we're in DC, the Nats, they're not doing too well right now, but they have some exciting talent. Dylan Cruz.
DJ Abrams. Gotta love him.
Very good.
Love Abrams.
Dylan Cruz is really good. What's the guy's name?
Stone Garrett was playing great before that horrible injury at Yankee Stadium.
Stone Garrett is great. There is another outfielder, James Wood, who looks really, really good.
Yeah, he's looking great in the minors. Love
Yeah.
Lane Thomas too. I know he's a little bit older, but might be a guy the Nats want to move.
Sure. I also would say I think looking more, I think the Mets have some good talent coming up in the prospect system. I think I think throughout baseball, there's just so many players that we don't know about that will just shock us next year as well. I mean, that happens every year. So I think there's just so many players to look out for. Ellie De La Cruz, of course, is a revolutionary talent, and there's so many players I can't name all of them. So yeah.
Mark, before we let you go, it's a must that we ask you what your World Series pick is this year.
Of course. So Tampa, I think Tampa against Atlanta. I think in 5 games, I think it'll be pretty easy for Atlanta to beat Tampa. I think Atlanta is just the best team in baseball, one of the best in the last 10 years. They're just so great. I think they will, unfortunately. I don't want them to win because I'm a New York Mets fan, but I think Atlanta will win the World Series, and I think they will win it pretty easily. So, yeah.
Well, Mark, it's been a pleasure having you on this segment. Always love your baseball insight, as we all know.
Of course. Thanks for
we appreciate it and hope to have you back on a future segment.
Same here. Thank you.
So yeah, that was our MLB segment to the Second Take Faithful. But Mark Machado, would you like to get us started on our Premier League predictions for this year?
Yeah, well, I feel like honestly, I should open the floor to you two, Shavain, being the Plastic City fan that you are, and Aiden being the United fan. So, I guess we got to start with the treble winners, right? So, Shavain, talk about City. Where are they at? What are you feeling for this season?
Any opportunity I get to talk about my team, I just gleam. So yeah, Man City is a generational team, very, very strong. And the thing that I like the most about our squad this year is that there aren't many changes from last year's treble winning team. We lost Gundogan, obviously we lost Riyad Mahrez, we lost a few other players, but we have found replacements. We got Kovacic, Mateo Kovacic, the Croatian who came from Chelsea, and he's now manning the midfield with Rodri. We have Josko Gvardiol, who's also a Croatian. It's a 21-year-old center back who's the highest paid defender in the history of football. And, Erling Haaland, you have nothing more to say when you have him on your team. And I think it's going to be tough for City to do the treble again. I think we win the Prem. I just think we're too strong and too diverse and to have too much depth. Even though we lost Kevin De Bruyne, we have signed Jeremy Doku and we just signed Matheus Nunes. So we'll see how those players fit in. But I think Phil Foden's going to take a bigger role, get us through the Prem. We have a very easy draw on the UCL this year, which is beneficial for us. We can play our B team throughout that. And then one of the FA Cup and the Carabao Cup, I think that is also very, very winnable. But I want to know from, the noisy neighbors, as they used to call us. You guys are the pretty quiet neighbors, aren't you?
I mean, you still pack out 70K every weekend, but it's still pretty loud. But no, I definitely agree. I think Manchester City in the league, I think they'll walk the league again. I don't think Pep Guardiola teams, especially with the depth that Manchester City have and the squad they have, I do think they're weaker than last year. I think they've taken a step back. I mean, obviously not having Kevin De Bruyne for a little bit of the season would be tough. I think losing Ilkay Gundogan is a bigger than people realize. Kovacic maybe on the field is not as like big of a loss as you think, but I mean, kind of. I don't think he's as offensively dynamic. I don't think he offers what Gundogan did in the final third. He's more of a first phase, second phase player.
Yeah.
I don't think Jeremy Doku is very good. I don't think he has any end product. Riyad Mahrez, like off your bench, is just an unbelievable thing to have. But I think they'll walk the league again. I don't see any other teams challenging them for the league. I don't think there's anyone that has the depth and has as many players as Pep does that are able to understand the system. But I do think that Manchester City are a Rodri injury away from being in major trouble because nobody can play that position on that team but him. So they have to protect him, make sure he's going to be okay for the season. I think he's their most important player right now. But
100%. No, I agree. I mean, I don't think anyone is challenging City this year. I think that's just the reality. So, Shavain, congrats. We can hand it to you right now. But Aiden, I do want to talk about United because I think that they're getting I mean, people love to hate on United. I think that's just the reality. Shout out Gabe. I know if he listens to this, he's gonna love this segment. But no, I mean, I don't know. Personally, my take, I think United are fine. I think they're fine right now. I think people like to point to, I keep hearing, Maguire and Evans. That's what people are talking about. United have, 5 injuries at the back right now? Name another team in Europe, and I'll even throw City in that could deal with 5 injuries at the back and, still cope. And I think, they're get a couple guys back. I think get some of the new guys integrated. I think they'll be fine. Aiden, where are you at with them?
yeah, so I definitely think we're going to be fine too. I think obviously any step back that United takes is magnified just because of who we are as a club, and everyone doesn't really like us. But I honestly think I think that we took a big step over the summer. I think we signed Mason Mount. He's not getting a lot of love right now from a lot of people. I think he's a good signing. I think Erik ten Hag will find a really good position for him. He's very good at giving you goals and assists. He's also very good at build-up play. I think he's in transition, which is how we like to play. Bruno Fernandes, I think, is even taking another step this year. He's an unbelievable player. I think he's the second best midfielder in the world right now in terms of what he offers you. Marcus Rashford, unbelievable. Obviously, still one of the best wingers in the world, in my opinion. I think Rasmus Højlund is definitely a really, really interesting signing. He's very young, so I don't know if he's going to give us that many goals this season, but in terms of an option and a threat up front, that's what we're really missing. I mean, you could see in the Arsenal game, Anthony Martial is up top. He didn't have an awful game, but he just doesn't offer much of a threat, so they're able to more focus on Rashford, focus on Anthony on the wing, which that's a whole other issue that we have to solve at the club. There's obviously a lot of issues behind the scenes at the club right now that I think need to get solved. I think that starts with Richard Arnold being removed. He's just doesn't really know what he's doing there, but I think we'll be okay. I mean, I think Amrabat will be a good signing. I think he offers balance in the midfield, especially in games against higher opposition. I think Christian Eriksen's looked really, really good this season so far. Coming back from injury last year, he was a little disappointing, which is understandable. But he started the season hot last year, and he's starting really well again. I think off the bench, having Alejandro Garnacho as an option as well, another year older, another season of the Premier League under his belt. I feel like almost every time he comes off the bench, he scores. So I think that's a dynamic option. Obviously, playing in the Champions League this year, that will have its implications because that's a lot more tougher games that we're adding to our schedule. But we also played the most games in Europe last season. I think up until we got knocked out of the Europa League, and we were still challenging for top 4 the entire season. But I do want to highlight one team in particular here that I think is going to be unbelievable this year, and I think Tottenham. I think Tottenham under Ange will be one of the best teams in the Premier League. He, I think, is one of the best managers in the world right now. And not even because of what he did at Celtic, but what he did in Australia, I think. In a league that has a salary cap, which everybody has the same amount of money, he won, I think, 7 years in a row with that team. So I think that's a little he's a little underrated. And I think what he's doing already, integrating James Madison, obviously he's loving life there so far. Heung-min Son, captain. I think Richarlison will come good under him. He's giving him time to develop. They have a lot of really exciting young players. Yves Bissouma has been playing out of his mind so far this season. I think they're the team to watch for this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's personally, I actually love to root for Tottenham just because everyone makes fun of the Spurs so much. It's kind of nice to actually see them have some competent management for once. Kind of speaking outside of like the big 5 or 6 per se in the Premier League, outside of the top of the table, who do you guys think are going to make noise in the Premier League? Like teams like West Ham, Aston Villa, Crystal Palace. Like, who do you think outside of the major powerhouses have a chance to kind of show their feathers a little bit and show that they're the real deal?
Brighton.
Yeah, I think the first one that comes to mind is easily Brighton. I mean, you could see the game they played at Newcastle last week. They ran them off the park, and Newcastle have a very good squad. And Brighton also, it's crazy for them because a big player for them will get injured, and then they'll bring on some 19-year-old kid from South America that completely fits into the system perfectly, and they'll score 2 goals. So they're a very interesting team. Roberto De Zerbi is a really, really interesting manager. They're definitely a team. Aston Villa, mixed emotions on them. They have a decent squad. I think Unai Emery is a really good manager, but Tyrone Mings, losing him before the season starts, leader at the back, really good ball-playing defender. Obviously, they just signed Longley, I think, on loan from Barcelona, so we'll see how that fits in. But, I think Brentford is always a good team, too. They play a really nice game. And I think West Ham, David Moyes, obviously, they don't play the most beautiful game, but they spent their Declan Rice money really well. Kudus is a dynamic player. It's a really good get for them, and I think only 45 million. Edson Alvarez, not the biggest fan of him, but I think he'll be good for them. And I think Jared Bowen's taking a step forward as a leader on the team. Mikel Antonio is the perfect David Moyes striker in terms of what he can do, holding up the ball and causing chaos with a bouncing ball in the box. I think West Ham will be good, and I think David Moyes knows exactly what he's doing there as well.
If West Ham continues to perform, I think we're going to have to get James McGeehan on the pod at some point to talk about.
Yeah, GW resident West Ham fan. Grew up in Bournemouth, but a fan of that Irons. So shout out to him.
Shout out to James.
Well, before we go, I just wanted to give a special shout out to Arsenal on bottling the league last year. Thank you, Arsenal. Love you forever.
Nah.
But no, this is a great segment. You know, we're short in time, obviously, in this podcast, but I think the Premier League's obviously going to still be the league to watch. We'll see. We'll see how City copes, and we'll see how teams like United, Tottenham, and some of the younger teams like Brighton do. But Aiden, thank you so much for coming on and talking about the Premier League with us. And we're going to be back for a next segment in just a second to talk about the MLS. So we'll see you guys there.